Hey guys, it's Scott with Scottie Beat Cards, and in this video, I want to look at the top 10 overperformers and the top 10 underperformers this year and what happened to their card values. Okay, so there's a metrics on Fangraphs. Fangraphs is one of the main companies that really have baseball statistics. It's Fangraphs and Baseball Reference. Baseball Reference has B WAR, Fangraphs has F WAR. That's why if you ever wondered why there's two different WARs, that's what it is. The only difference really between them is how they calculate defense. We're not going to dive into the differences now because that's not the point of this video. But I want to discuss Fangraphs Zips projections. What Zips projections are is they actually will go and try to predict how a player will do in a given year based off of the 3 or 4 year performance prior to that year. So every single year they will release their Zips projections, and they actually will give a 3-year projection projecting a few years in the future, and they will do their best to show how a player is going to perform. So I want to just kind of explain if you can use these Zips projections in future years to predict if a card of a specific player is going to go up, right? Can we say, okay, well, the Zips projection says he's a 5 to 7 more player. If that happens, are his cards going to actually increase or decrease? So let's look at this. Like I mentioned, Zips projections are Fangraphs projections for every season for every single player. They try to predict counting stats, WAR, and more, defensive metrics, everything. Zips also can predict the next 3 years based off of the last 3 seasons and aging curves. It looks like if a player is heading to their age 33 season, even if they had a good 32 season, they're going to get hit because the next seasons will be 33, 34, and 35. Most people think Zips projections are too low. I did a video earlier this year looking at projections for players. Everyone said that's way too low. These are all way too low. I want to discuss, were they too low? So I'm going to show you if they were too low, too high, or just right, and then we'll look at the card values. The first thing I want to point out is these were the top 60 players projected by Zips heading into this season. You'll see Aaron Judge with the predicted 8.0 WAR season, which is crazy because of the amazing season he had 2 years ago. Then we had Trey Turner because of his power plus his speed, Juan Soto, Jose Ramirez. Number 5 was Carlos Correa, Jordan, Lindor, Bregman, Rutschman, Marcus Semien, Nolan Arenado, Will Smith, Julio Rodriguez, Mookie Betts, and so forth. Generally, this list makes sense and why they're there based off of past performance. I only did the top 60 because this is the first 2 pages when I'm looking at how people actually fared, just because anything further out is so, kind of a toss-up that it's not really worth looking at. I also want to not include pitchers, just looking at hitters for this particular video. What I'm doing in this video is I'm actually looking at their actual WAR compared to the WAR that was predicted for them. As an example, Carlos Correa had 5.9 F WAR as his predicted WAR total, but he was much lower than that. So I went his actual WAR total minus his predicted WAR total, and that's the number we received. So the one thing I want to show are the real results to predicted results. How many players matched or beat predictions? Only 14. Only 14 of these 60 actually beat the WAR that was projected by Zips. So how many players did not meet predictions? 76% of them did not match what was predicted by Zips. On top of that, how many players within even 1 WAR? So for Cray as an example, if he's at 5.9 WAR, was he at least within 1? Was he at 4.9? Only 38% of players within 1 WAR of the projections. How many players beat expectations by 2 WAR or more? Only 5 players beat it by 2 WAR or more. How many players beat expectations by 1 WAR or more? Only 7 beat projections by 1 WAR or more. How many players underperformed by 1 WAR or more? 32, over 50% did worse than what Fangraphs predicted. How many players underperformed by 2 WAR or more? 18, which is actually 30% of players actually did worse than what was projected. So here are the top 10 performers. These are the performers, these are the projected WAR totals, and these are the reality of the WAR totals. We have Ronald Acuna Jr. who beat his projection by 3.3 F WAR. Then we have Ohtani who beat it. This is just batting for Ohtani, and then you have pitching on top. But he actually had 6.6 batting WAR, 3.1 actually beating his predicted WAR. Then we have Mookie Betts at 2.9, Matt Olson at 2.1, Corbin Carroll at 1.8, Corey Seager at 1.3, Wander Franco at 0.9, only playing not even a full season because of stuff that happened. Marcus Semien at 0.7 and Julio Rodriguez at 0.5. So these are the players, the top 10 performers who beat what was actually expected of them heading into this season. So what happened to their card values? Did they go up? Did they stay the same? Did they go down? Here is what happened to the top 10. The biggest riser was Matt Olson, then Marcus Semien, then Freddie Freeman, then Acuna, then Mookie Betts, then Ozzie Albies. I think he was the next one. I included him because I think he's number 11, but because of Wander Franco, I included him. I just didn't show him on the last one. Ohtani actually lost 5%, but that's just because of the hype heading into the season, and then he got hurt at the end. If not, he would have been positive. Wander Franco we know what happened to Wander Franco, and he would have been positive by a lot in my opinion, but he's actually down as well. And the only two players that actually lost value over the course of the season, so the last 6 months essentially, were Francisco Lindor and Julio Rodriguez, who actually beat their predicted Fangraphs WAR through the Zips platform. So Julio Rodriguez, he barely beat his. He had 5.4 projected and he got 5.9, which is really defensive heavy in my opinion. He played really well in August and September offensively, and that is why he had such a slow start. That's what really killed his values, as he was really hyped up heading into the season. He was the hot rookie, and so just because he barely met expectations, it actually is a drop in value. With Lindor, it's an interesting situation. I think he had a 30-30 season. His batting average isn't quite as high as it used to be, but he had a good year offensively and defensively, and his WAR totals show that, because this last year he actually had a good amount of WAR. So overall, I don't know why he was so low, but that is what happens. So here are the top 10 underperformers. Next up, we have Trey Turner at negative 2.8 WAR, so he actually was way below. Then we have Alejandro Kirk at negative 2.9. Arenado was negative 3 with only 2.6 WAR. I hope this isn't the start of Arenado's decline, because it definitely could be. DJ LeMahieu had 1.1, which actually dropped him by 3 WAR compared to what his projections were. Vlad is probably one of the most disappointing players this year to me, because he went from a projection of 4.1 to 1, so that's negative 3.1. But the very worst, we're not going to look at everybody individually, but the very worst is Carlos Correa, who is projected for 5.9, top 5 in baseball, and he ended with 1.1 WAR. So that's a negative 4.8 from his projection. So what happened to their values? Let's look at that really fast. Here we see that the biggest drop was actually Yoshida, because he came in and he actually performed really well at the beginning, and then towards the end he really dropped. On top of that, he didn't have many cards that were selling at the beginning of the season because he was a rookie, so he's kind of an outlier. So the player who actually dropped the most, who is an established major leaguer, was Vladimir Guerrero Jr. He has dropped 35%, which makes sense because he had one of the worst performances this season compared to projected performances. And so we can see a pretty big drop. For Vlad, Trey Turner dropped, which makes sense. Byron Buxton dropped. I'm surprised he did not drop more. Maybe because his cards were already pretty low, which is why he didn't drop more. Nolan Arenado dropped quite a bit. JT Realmuto. Correa did not drop as much as you would anticipate. DJ LeMahieu dropped 20%. Kirk dropped 18.3%. Jake Cronenworth dropped 17.2%. And the smallest drop of the bottom 10 was Trevor Story. And I'm guessing because he did not meet expectations, more so due to injury than anything else. And when he came back, his first time playing in quite a while. So that is the bottom 10 underperformers. Here are just a few more I thought were interesting. I did include the not ranked players who weren't in the top 60. William Contreras outperformed his WAR by 3.2 WAR. He all of a sudden went to Milwaukee and became one of the best defensive catchers in baseball. Plus, he's great offensively. He's up 5.7% because of that. Bobby Witt Jr. to me is someone that I think is fantastic. He's a stud, right? He's projected for 3.4 WAR. Came in with 5.7 because he went from the worst defensive shortstop in baseball to one of the top 3 defensive shortstops and even top 10 players in baseball defensively. So overall, the fact that his values actually dropped 10% is pretty staggering and kind of mind-numbing. They had a 30-30 season, plus he was one of the best defensive shortstops in baseball, but he still dropped in value. It just shows where we are after a rookie season. It's almost impossible to have your cards continue to go up heading into your sophomore season. Either way, Bobby Witt Jr. beating expectations this much is great for his card values in the future because he's so young, good defensively now. He's going to figure out how to get on base more. That's his big thing is OBP because he can't get on base often. He doesn't walk, and that's why his WAR is not higher. Once he figures that out, gets his OPS from the low to mid 800s to the 900s, this number is going to be even higher, especially with that newfound defense. Then we have Corbin Carroll, who already talked about him, but he beat his expectations, one of the few rookies. Mike Trout underperformed. He was on pace to beat this expectation easily before he got hurt in July and was out the rest of the year. Then we had Aaron Judge, who got hurt, who probably would have matched 8 WAR or pretty close, but he did miss that. And we can see every single one of these players drop besides William Contreras. So overall, what does this mean? Can you use Zips projections to predict baseball card values? No, you can't. You can't just because if we look at the beginning, these stats are pretty crazy. Only 5 players beat expectations by 2 WAR or more. So only 5 players really overperformed what was expected of them heading into this season, and it can be extremely difficult to predict the top 10% of these players. If you can do so, if you're really high on Juan Soto next year when his ZiPS projection's lower, then that's how you can, make a good chunk of change. But overall, it is really hard to do this. And so trying to make real-time money is basically like gambling. But over the course of the full season, hopefully a player you collect, like I collected Mookie, pays off for you. And overall, it can be really difficult to predict the future. But let me know your thoughts in the comments below on this particular situation, if you see any trends that you might be able to execute on next year. And I will see you in the next video.